Welcome back. In tonight's chapters, change is in the air, even if some of it's quiet. Mary takes a step toward reclaiming herself. Gwen moves closer to the future she dreams of, and even Robert is beginning to consider a world different from the one he's always known. Things aren't healed, not yet, but something is definitely shifting. Let's get back to Downton. Chapter 13. New Beginnings. 2 weeks had passed since Kamal Pamuk's body had been removed from Downton Abbey. The house had gradually shed the pall of tragedy that had hung over it, returning to the familiar rhythms that had governed life there for generations. Yet beneath the surface of resumed normality, subtle changes had taken root, shifts in relationships and perspectives that would, in time, prove as significant as the event that had catalyzed them. For Gwen Dawson, the intervening days had brought unexpected hope. She sat at the small desk in Lady Sybil's bedroom, nervously clutching an envelope as the youngest Crawley daughter paced excitedly before her. "Well, open it," Sybil urged, her eyes bright with anticipation. "It must be their answer." Gwen stared at the envelope bearing the letterhead of Feldman and Company, solicitors. "What if it's a rejection? I'm not sure I can bear it with you watching." "And what if it's an acceptance? Would you deny me the joy of sharing that moment?" Sybil countered, sitting on the edge of her bed. "Besides, I've invested far too much in this venture to be excluded now." Indeed, Lady Sybil had proven herself an unexpected but fervent ally in Gwen's quest. Beyond simply providing the advertisement, she had helped draft Gwen's application letter, offered advice on interview attire, and even arranged for the household's rarely used typewriter to be made available for practice. With trembling fingers, Gwen broke the seal and unfolded the single page within. Her eyes scanned the formal language, widening as she reached the middle of the page. "They want me to come for an interview," she whispered, almost afraid that speaking the words aloud might somehow negate them. "Next Tuesday, at 2:00. "Gwen, that's wonderful," Sybil exclaimed, clasping her hands together. "I knew they would see your potential." "But how will I get there?" Gwen asked, practical concerns immediately surfacing. "Thirsk is miles away, and I can't exactly ask for the day off to interview for another position." "Leave that to me," Sybil assured her with the breezy confidence of someone accustomed to having obstacles removed from her path. "I'll speak to Mama about requiring your assistance on an errand to Thirsk. She needn't know the details." "Is that quite honest, milady?" Gwen questioned, though with less conviction than when she had first raised similar concerns. "It's not dishonest," Sybil reasoned. "I do require your assistance, just not in the way Mama might assume. Besides, this is your future we're discussing. Surely that's worth a small omission of the complete truth." Gwen smiled despite herself, caught between gratitude for Sybil's support and apprehension at the subterfuge. "If you're sure, milady." "I am," Sybil affirmed. "Now, we must prepare you properly. You'll need to practice your shorthand and typing every spare moment, and we should think about what you'll wear, something professional, but not too elaborate. Perhaps we could alter one of my older costumes." As Sybil continued outlining her plans, Gwen marveled at the unexpected turn her life had taken. A few short weeks ago, her typewriter had been discovered, her ambitions exposed to ridicule. Now, Lady Sybil Crawley was not only championing her cause, but actively conspiring to help her achieve it. "Thank you, milady," Gwen said suddenly, interrupting Sybil's enthusiastic planning. "Not just for the practical help, but for believing I could do this when most would say I'm reaching above my station. Sybil's expression softened. Your station, as you call it, is determined by your abilities and determination, not by the circumstances of your birth. Never let anyone convince you otherwise. The passionate conviction in Sybil's voice revealed a deeper current of belief, one that extended far beyond Gwen's individual situation to encompass broader questions of social justice and opportunity. In that moment, Gwen recognized that in helping her reach for a different future, Lady Sybil was also giving voice to her own emerging worldview, one that would, in time, challenge the very foundations of the world they both inhabited. In the servants' hall, Mrs. Hughes presided over afternoon tea with her customary efficiency. The staff moved through their brief respite with the practiced rhythm of people accustomed to making the most of limited free time, conversation flowing around the long table in disjointed streams. "Has anyone seen Mr. Bates?" Anna inquired, noticing the valet's empty chair. "He went into the village," William replied through a mouthful of bread and jam. "Said he had an errand that couldn't wait." "Seems to have a lot of those lately," Thomas observed with a smirk. "Private business. Very mysterious." "Unlike some, Mr. Bates doesn't feel the need to broadcast his every movement," Anna retorted, her defense of the valet immediate and pointed. Now, Mrs. Hughes intervened, sensing the potential for escalation. "There's no need for unpleasantness. I'm sure Mr. Bates will return in plenty of time for the dressing gong." The housekeeper's assurance effectively ended that particular line of conversation, though Thomas's expression suggested he was merely biding his time. Since the night of Pamuk's death, he had been unusually subdued in his antagonism toward Bates, his attention seemingly diverted by whatever theories he and O'Brien were cultivating about the Turkish diplomat's demise. As the staff began dispersing back to their duties, Mrs. Hughes caught Anna's arm. "A word, if you please." She led the head housemaid to her sitting room, closing the door to ensure privacy. "Is everything quite all right, Anna?" Mrs. Hughes asked, her perceptive eyes studying the younger woman's face. "You've seemed preoccupied these past weeks." Anna maintained her composure, though her heart quickened at the direct inquiry. "I'm fine, Mrs. Hughes. Perhaps a little tired, but nothing a good night's sleep won't cure." "It's not like you to snap at Thomas, provoked though you might have been," Mrs. Hughes observed. "And Lady Mary has been keeping you rather busy at odd hours, I've noticed." "Her ladyship has had trouble sleeping since the incident," Anna explained carefully. "She sometimes requires attention during the night." Mrs. Hughes nodded slowly, accepting the explanation without fully believing it covered the entirety of the situation. "You know you can speak to me, Anna, in confidence, if there's anything troubling you." The kindness in the housekeeper's offer nearly broke Anna's carefully maintained composure. How simple it would be to share the burden of knowledge, to unburden herself of the secret that weighed on her conscience. Yet her loyalty to Lady Mary remained absolute, overriding even the temptation of personal relief. "Thank you, Mrs. Hughes," Anna replied with genuine appreciation. "But truly, I'm quite well." As Anna departed, Mrs. Hughes remained seated, her brow furrowed in thought. In her decades of service, she had developed an instinct for the undercurrents that ran through a great house, the secrets and tensions that shaped relationships above and below stairs. Something significant had occurred the night of the Turkish diplomat's death. Something beyond the official narrative of a tragic natural event. The subtle changes in behavior among certain members of the household. Lady Mary's withdrawn demeanor, Anna's protective watchfulness, Thomas and O'Brien's whispered conferences, all pointed to knowledge unshared and truths concealed. Yet Mrs. Hughes was also wise enough to recognize when intervention might cause more harm than good. Whatever had transpired, she could only hope that time would eventually diminish its impact on those she had come to care for as part of her extended family. The village green basked in afternoon sunshine as Bates emerged from the post office, a small parcel tucked under his arm. His gait, while still distinctive, had improved noticeably since disposing of the tortuous leg brace. The pain of his war injury remained, but it was a familiar discomfort, one he had learned to accommodate rather than fight against. As he turned toward the path that would take him back to Downton, he spotted a familiar figure ahead, Matthew Crawley, engaged in conversation with the village solicitor outside his office. Bates slowed his pace, not wishing to interrupt, but Matthew caught sight of him and concluded his business with a handshake. "Bates," Matthew greeted him warmly. "A fine afternoon for a walk, though I imagine yours has a more purposeful nature than simple exercise." "Just collecting a small parcel, Mr. Crawley," Bates replied, nodding respectfully. "And yourself, sir?" "Business in the village." "Some legal matters requiring attention," Matthew confirmed. "Nothing of great interest, I'm afraid. Are you heading back to Downton? Perhaps we might walk together." The suggestion, offered with genuine amiability, spoke to Matthew's democratic spirit, a quality that had initially unsettled the more traditional members of the household, but had gradually earned him respect both upstairs and down. As they walked together along the village lane, Matthew inquired after life at the Abbey with the genuine interest of someone still adjusting to the complexities of a great house. "Things have settled back into their usual pattern, I gather?" he asked, "after the unfortunate business with Mr. Pamuk." "Yes, sir," Bates confirmed, careful to maintain proper discretion. "Though such events leave their mark, of course." Matthew nodded thoughtfully, particularly on those most directly affected. "I've noticed Lady Mary seems changed by the experience, more subdued than is her usual manner." Bates kept his expression neutral, though he noted the concern underlying Matthew's observation. "It was a shock to the entire family, Mr. Crawley, Lady Mary especially, having been his riding companion that day." "Of course," Matthew agreed quickly. "I didn't mean to imply. That is, I'm merely concerned for her well-being, as a cousin should be." The slight qualification at the end suggested Matthew was aware his interest might be interpreted as exceeding familial duty. Bates, whose position had taught him the value of discretion, offered no comment on this undercurrent. "I'm sure her ladyship appreciates your concern," he replied diplomatically. They continued in companionable silence for a time, the rhythm of their footsteps punctuated by the distant sounds of village life behind them. As they approached the gates of Downton, Matthew spoke again, his tone more reflective. "It's strange, isn't it? How a single event, the arrival of a letter, a chance meeting, an unexpected death, can alter the course of so many lives." "Indeed, sir," Bates agreed, his thoughts turning to his own life's unexpected turns, from soldier to prisoner, from prisoner to valet. from despair to cautious hope. I suppose the measure of a person lies not in avoiding such unexpected turns, but in how they navigate the new path laid before them, Matthew continued, speaking almost to himself. A wise observation, Mr. Crawley, Bates acknowledged, and one that applies equally to all stations of life. Matthew smiled at this, recognizing the gentle reminder that wisdom was not the exclusive province of the educated or privileged. Indeed it does, Bates. Indeed it does. As they parted ways at the entrance to the house, Bates reflected that the future heir to Downton was, in many ways, a more approachable and less conventional gentleman than might have been expected, qualities that might serve him well in navigating the complexities of the role that awaited him. Whether Lady Mary would eventually recognize these qualities as valuable remained to be seen, but Bates had observed enough of human nature to suspect that the current distance between them might not be as insurmountable as it appeared. The setting sun cast long shadows across the library as Robert sat at his desk, examining estate accounts with Carson standing attentively nearby. The ledgers before him told a familiar story, one of dwindling returns and increasing costs that had become the unwelcome reality of many great estates in the modern era. The new tenant at Yew Tree Farm has paid his first quarter's rent, Robert noted, finding one positive entry among the concerning figures. That's something, at least. Indeed, my lord, Carson agreed. Mr. Mason seems a conscientious farmer. William speaks very highly of his father's methods. Does he? Well, let's hope that confidence is justified, Robert said, closing the ledger with a sigh. We can't afford another failed tenancy. The implicit acknowledgement of financial pressure was unusual from Lord Grantham, who typically maintained an optimistic front regarding Downton's prospects. Carson, recognizing both the confidence and concern inherent in such a statement, responded with his customary support. Downton has weathered many challenges throughout its history, my lord. I have every confidence it will continue to do so under your stewardship. Robert smiled appreciatively at the butler's steadfast loyalty. Thank you, Carson. Your faith in the resilience of this house sometimes exceeds even my own. He rose from the desk, moving to stand before the window that overlooked the expansive grounds. Has there been any further discussion below stairs regarding our recent unfortunate visitor? Carson understood immediately the delicate nature of the inquiry. Very little, my lord. The initial speculation has largely subsided as daily routines have reasserted themselves. And Thomas and O'Brien? Robert pressed, turning to face the butler directly. Less vocal than initially, though I wouldn't say their interest has entirely abated, Carson admitted. I've made it clear that dwelling on such matters is neither productive nor appropriate. Robert nodded, satisfied with this assessment. Good. The Turkish embassy has accepted the official account without question. The last thing we need is idle gossip resurrecting the matter. Quite so, my lord, Carson agreed emphatically. Their conversation was interrupted by Cora's entrance, her expression brightening as she saw her husband. There you are, Robert. I've been looking for you. Nothing wrong, I hope? Robert inquired, moving to greet her. Not at all, Cora assured him. I've had a letter from Rosamond. She's planning to visit next week and is bringing a friend, Sir Richard Carlyle. Apparently, he expressed interest in meeting Mary after hearing about her from Rosamond at some dinner or other. The news was delivered with the casual air of social planning, but both men recognized the underlying significance, another potential suitor being introduced to Lady Mary, particularly welcome after the Napier prospect had evaporated. Sir Richard Carlyle, Robert repeated thoughtfully. The newspaper man? Yes, I believe he owns several publications, Cora confirmed. Quite successful, by all accounts. Robert's expression suggested he found this credential less than entirely impressive. Well, I suppose we must be gracious hosts, regardless of his profession. He's quite well respected in London society, Cora pointed out gently. And Mary could do with some distraction. She's been rather withdrawn since. The unfinished sentence hung in the air, a tactful reference to the shadow that had fallen across their daughter's usual vivacity. Yes, quite right, Robert conceded. Please inform Carson of the expected additions to our party, and we'll ensure everything is prepared to receive them properly. As Cora departed to continue her preparations, Robert turned back to Carson with a slight grimace. The newspaper business. Good God. I suppose we must move with the times, but really, Carson, sometimes I wonder what's becoming of the world we knew. Change is inevitable, my lord, Carson observed with philosophical resignation, though I share your sentiment that not all change represents improvement. Robert sighed, his gaze returning to the window and the timeless landscape beyond. Well, if this Sir Richard can bring a smile back to Mary's face, I suppose we must welcome him, tradesman or not. The subtle shift in Robert's priorities, from rigid adherence to class expectations to concern for his daughter's happiness, reflected his own gradual adaptation to changing times. Like Downton itself, Lord Grantham was learning, however reluctantly, that survival sometimes required flexibility in the face of a world that increasingly valued different qualities than those that had defined his generation. Mary stood alone in the gallery, the portraits of Crawley ancestors gazing down upon her with the serene confidence of those whose place in history was secured. The evening light filtered through tall windows, casting elongated shadows across the polished floor and illuminating dust motes that danced in the golden beams. So absorbed was she in contemplation that she didn't immediately notice her mother's approach. Cora's voice, gentler than it had been since the night of their desperate collaboration, broke through her reverie. There you are. I've been looking everywhere. Mary turned, composing her features into their usual mask of polite interest. I was just thinking. Cora studied her daughter's face, noting the subtle changes that recent events had wrought, a new gravity in her expression, a wariness that hadn't been there before. I've had news that might interest you. Aunt Rosamond is visiting next week. How lovely, Mary replied without enthusiasm. Her relationship with her father's sister was cordial but not particularly close. She's bringing a friend, Sir Richard Carlyle, Cora continued, watching for Mary's reaction. Apparently, he expressed specific interest in making your acquaintance. Did he indeed? Mary's tone carried a note of weary skepticism. And what has Aunt Rosamond told this Sir Richard that would inspire such interest in a woman he's never met? Only good things, I'm sure, Cora assured her. He's quite successful, owns several newspapers, and has considerable influence in London society. A newspaper baron, Mary observed dryly. How Papa must be thrilled. Despite her outward resistance, Cora detected a flicker of interest beneath Mary's dismissive response. After weeks of withdrawn behavior, any spark of engagement, however small, seemed promising. I thought you might enjoy having someone new to converse with, Cora suggested. Someone with a different perspective than our usual circle. The underlying message was clear. Here was an opportunity to move forward, to engage with life again, rather than dwelling in the shadow of recent events. Mary recognized her mother's intent, and despite her initial resistance, found herself considering the possibility. I suppose I can be civil for Aunt Rosamond's sake, she conceded, turning back to the window. Cora approached closer, standing beside her daughter, as they both gazed out at the estate bathed in evening light. Mary, she began hesitantly, I know these past weeks have been difficult for both of us. It was the closest either had come to directly referencing the night that bound them in their uncomfortable conspiracy. Mary remained silent, neither encouraging nor discouraging the conversation. I want you to know, Cora continued carefully, that while I cannot condone what happened, I do understand that life must go on, for all of us. Mary turned to her mother, studying her face for signs of the anger and disappointment that had characterized their interactions since that night. What she found instead was concern, tinged with a reluctant understanding that surprised her. Does it? Mary asked softly. Go on, I mean. Sometimes I wonder if that night will define everything that follows, if every future happiness will be shadowed by the memory of what we did. Cora reached out, taking Mary's hand in a gesture that bridged the emotional distance that had grown between them. Only if you allow it to. The past cannot be changed, Mary, but it need not determine your future unless you give it that power. The simple wisdom in her mother's words struck Mary with unexpected force. She had been living as though her life had ended that night, as though one terrible mistake had foreclosed all possibility of redemption or happiness. I'm not suggesting you forget, Cora clarified, sensing Mary's thoughts. Merely that you allow yourself to live beyond it, to seek whatever happiness lies ahead, without being fettered by what lies behind. Mary squeezed her mother's hand, a wordless acknowledgement of both the advice and the tentative reconciliation it represented. They stood together in silence for a moment, united not only by blood and by secret, but by the shared understanding that survival sometimes required looking forward rather than back. I'll wear the blue dress for dinner, Mary said finally, her tone lighter than it had been in weeks. The one that doesn't make me look like an Assyrian priestess. Cora smiled, recognizing the small jest as a significant step toward normalcy. An excellent choice. And perhaps the sapphire earrings your grandmother gave you for your birthday. If you think they're not too much, Mary agreed, falling into the familiar pattern of sartorial discussion that had characterized so many of their conversations before the world had tilted on its axis. As they walked together toward Mary's room, the unspoken weight that had hung between them seemed marginally lighter, not gone, perhaps never entirely gone, but no longer quite so suffocating in its presence. It was a beginning, tentative and fragile, but a beginning nonetheless. Chapter 14. Toward Tomorrow. The morning room at Downton Abbey was suffused with pale spring light as Anna carefully arranged a vase of fresh-cut flowers on the side table. Though the task was simple, she approached it with the same methodical attention she gave to all her duties, a quality that had served her well in navigating the tumultuous weeks since the Turkish diplomat's death. "Those look lovely, Anna," Lady Edith commented as she entered, a book tucked under her arm. Where did you find daffodils so early in the season? Mr. Molesley gave them to me, my lady, Anna replied. From Mr. Crawley's garden. He has quite a way with flowers, apparently. Mr. Molesley or Cousin Matthew? Edith asked with a smile, setting her book on a nearby table. Mr. Molesley, my lady, Anna clarified, returning the smile, though I'm sure Mr. Crawley appreciates the results of his efforts. Edith moved to the window, gazing out at the gardens, where patches of early color had begun to emerge from the winter-brown earth. It's strange to think how much has changed since they first arrived, she mused. Cousin Matthew and Cousin Isabel, I mean. They seemed so foreign to Downton then. And now, my lady? Anna prompted, curious about Edith's perspective. Edith considered the question before answering. Now they seem almost as much a part of Downton as the rest of us. Different, certainly, but belonging here nonetheless. The admission carried a note of acceptance that would have been unthinkable in the early days of the Crawleys' arrival from Manchester. Whether this represented genuine growth on Edith's part, or merely resignation to their permanent presence, was difficult to determine, but Anna suspected it contained elements of both. Will that be all, my lady? Anna asked, having completed her arrangement. Yes, thank you, Anna, Edith replied distractedly, her gaze still fixed on the gardens beyond the window. As Anna departed, she wondered if Edith's apparent reconciliation to Matthew's place at Downton extended to the possibility of him inheriting the estate, and, more pointedly, to the prospect of him eventually choosing one of the Crawley sisters as his countess. The middle daughter's initial attempts to win his attention had been overshadowed by recent events, but Anna had observed enough of human nature to recognize that such ambitions rarely died completely. They merely adapted to changing circumstances. In the servants' hall, preparations for luncheon were underway with the usual choreographed efficiency. Mrs. Patmore issued commands from her culinary domain, while Daisy scurried between tasks, her movements more confident than they had been a few months prior. Thomas and O'Brien sat at the far end of the table, temporarily unoccupied, as they awaited the upstairs luncheon bell. Their hushed conversation ceased abruptly as Bates entered, his presence still triggering Thomas's instinctive animosity, despite the footman's recent preoccupation with other matters. Well, well, if it isn't the mysterious Mr. Bates, Thomas remarked, loud enough to ensure his target would hear. Another errand in the village yesterday? You're becoming quite the man about town. Bates regarded Thomas with calm indifference. Just a personal matter. Nothing that would interest you. You'd be surprised what interests me, Thomas replied with a knowing smirk. I've found that personal matters often prove the most revealing. O'Brien's thin lips curved in appreciation of Thomas's veiled threat. But before the exchange could escalate, Carson appeared in the doorway, his imposing figure commanding immediate attention. Thomas, her ladyship has requested tea in the drawing-room for herself and Lady Mary, the butler announced, and Mr. Bates, his lordship would like to see you in the library when you have a moment. Yes, Mr. Carson, both men responded in unison, their burgeoning confrontation forestalled by duty. As Thomas departed with ill-concealed reluctance, Carson fixed Bates with a meaningful look. I trust any personal matters won't interfere with your responsibilities to his lordship. Never, Mr. Carson, Bates assured him firmly. Downton and his lordship's needs remain my priority at all times. The butler nodded, apparently satisfied with this declaration. See that they do. We've had quite enough disruption recently without adding to it unnecessarily. The mild rebuke served as a reminder that Carson's primary concern was always the smooth operation of the household and the maintenance of proper standards. Any personal dramas or conflicts, whether involving Turkish diplomats or cantankerous footmen, were evaluated primarily through the lens of their potential impact on Downton's functioning and reputation. In the library, Robert stood before the fireplace, absently stroking Pharaoh's head as he contemplated the leather-bound volume in his hand. The sound of the door opening drew his attention, and he turned to find Bates entering with a respectful nod. "Ah, Bates, thank you for coming. Close the door, would you?" As Bates complied, Robert placed the book on a nearby table and addressed his valet with uncharacteristic hesitation. "I wanted to speak with you about a somewhat delicate matter." "Of course, my lord," Bates replied, his expression revealing nothing. "Carson has brought to my attention certain conversations below stairs," Robert continued, choosing his words carefully, "regarding our recent Turkish visitor and the unfortunate circumstances of his passing." Bates remained silent, waiting for his employer to reach the point of this unusual conversation. "I understand from Carson that Thomas and O'Brien seem particularly interested in the matter," Robert elaborated. "And while servants' gossip is hardly unusual, I'm concerned that their speculations might extend beyond what is appropriate or accurate." "I see, my lord," Bates acknowledged, though his neutral tone revealed nothing of his own thoughts on the matter. Robert studied his valet's face, seeking some indication of his awareness or involvement in whatever theories might be circulating below stairs. "I value your discretion, Bates, always have, and I wonder if you might keep an ear to the ground, so to speak. Let me know if these conversations take a turn that might be concerning for the family." The request, though framed as casual, carried unmistakable weight. Robert was effectively asking Bates to monitor his fellow servants and report back on their discussions, a role that would further isolate him from his already wary colleagues. "If I may speak frankly, my lord," Bates ventured after a moment's consideration. "Please do," Robert encouraged. "I believe Thomas and O'Brien's interest in the matter is largely driven by their natural inclination toward dramatic speculation," Bates observed diplomatically. "Without significant new information, I expect their focus will gradually shift to other matters as time passes." "And you don't believe they possess any such new information?" Robert pressed, his concern evident beneath the casual phrasing. "I have no reason to think so, my lord," Bates replied truthfully, "though I'm not privy to all their conversations, of course." Robert nodded, apparently reassured by Bates's assessment. "Well, nevertheless, I'd appreciate you keeping me informed if the situation changes. The family has had quite enough distress without adding unfounded rumors to the mix." "Of course, my lord," Bates agreed, recognizing both the request and the trust it represented. As he prepared to withdraw, Robert added one final comment. "And Bates, I've noticed you seem to be moving more comfortably these past few weeks. Whatever you've done for your leg appears to have helped." The unexpected observation caught Bates by surprise. "Thank you, my lord. I've found that sometimes the simplest approaches prove most effective in the end." "Indeed," Robert agreed with a warm smile. a philosophy that might well apply beyond physical ailments, I should think. The moment of personal connection between employer and servant, transcending yet acknowledging the boundaries of their respective positions, spoke to the unique relationship they had developed through years of shared experiences. For all the rigid hierarchy that defined life at Downton, such moments of genuine human recognition occasionally pierced the carefully maintained veneer of formal separation. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the lawn as Mary walked alone, her pace leisurely but purposeful. These solitary strolls had become a daily ritual, a time for reflection away from the watchful eyes of family and servants. Today, however, her isolation was interrupted by the unexpected sight of Matthew approaching from the direction of the village, his bicycle conspicuously absent. "Cousin Matthew," she greeted him, moderating her surprise into polite acknowledgement. "No bicycle today?" "I decided to walk," he explained, falling into step beside her as if by prior arrangement. Sometimes one needs to slow down to properly appreciate one's surroundings. Mary glanced at him skeptically. "And here I thought lawyers were perpetually in a hurry, charging by the minute and forever racing to their next appointment." "A common misconception," Matthew replied good-naturedly. "The best legal work often happens in moments of careful consideration rather than frantic activity." "How very philosophical," Mary observed, though without the sharp edge that would have characterized such a comment weeks earlier. "And what careful considerations bring you to Downton this afternoon?" "More discussions with Papa about the estate." "Actually, I came to see you," Matthew admitted, his directness catching her off guard. Mary's step faltered slightly before she recovered her composure. "Me? Whatever for?" "To invite you to dinner at Crawley House," Matthew explained. "Mother is hosting a small gathering next week. Nothing elaborate, just a few local acquaintances, and she specifically asked me to extend the invitation to you." "How unexpected," Mary replied, genuinely surprised by this development. Her relationship with Isabel, while cordial, had never suggested particular warmth on either side. "Is it?" Matthew asked. "Mother has always admired your spirit, even when you've been at odds, and she thought, well, we both thought you might enjoy an evening away from Downton. A change of scene, so to speak." The consideration behind the invitation touched Mary more than she cared to admit. After weeks of feeling simultaneously exposed and isolated, visible to all yet truly seen by almost none, the simple gesture of inclusion seemed unexpectedly meaningful. "That's very kind," she acknowledged, her tone softening, "though I warn you, I'm not particularly good company these days." "I'll take my chances," Matthew replied, with a smile that suggested he found her company more than adequate, regardless of her self-assessment. They walked in companionable silence for a time, the distant sounds of estate workers and birdsong creating a peaceful backdrop to their stroll. When Matthew spoke again, his tone was careful but direct. "Mary, I hope you know that whatever difficulties you've faced recently, they don't define you in the eyes of those who truly know you." The statement, offered without preamble or explanation, struck uncomfortably close to Mary's most private fears. She stiffened, defensive barriers rising instinctively. "And you presume to be among those who truly know me, after such a brief acquaintance?" "Perhaps not fully," Matthew conceded, undeterred by her sharp response. But I'd like to think I've come to know enough of the real Mary Crawley to recognize that she's far more than any single event or decision might suggest. Mary studied his face, searching for signs of calculation or condescension, but finding only earnest sincerity. The real Mary Crawley, she repeated thoughtfully. I'm not entirely sure such a person exists anymore, or if she ever did. She exists, Matthew affirmed with quiet certainty, though perhaps she's changing, as we all must when life presents us with unexpected challenges. The perceptiveness of his observation unsettled Mary, suggesting an understanding that went beyond what she had revealed to him or what he should logically have deduced from their limited interactions. For a terrifying moment, she wondered if he somehow knew the truth about Kamal Pamuk's death, if whispers had reached him despite her family's best efforts to contain the situation. What exactly are you suggesting, Cousin Matthew? She asked, unable to completely disguise her unease. Matthew seemed to realize he had ventured onto sensitive ground, only that we all face moments that change us, for better or worse, and that those changes need not be feared. They're simply part of becoming who we're meant to be. The gentle philosophy, offered without presumption or judgment, diffused Mary's immediate anxiety. Whatever Matthew might suspect or know, his response suggested not condemnation, but acceptance, a quality she had encountered all too rarely in her experience. And who exactly am I meant to be according to your assessment? She asked, the question emerging with unexpected vulnerability beneath its superficial challenge. Matthew considered her question with the seriousness it deserved, despite its somewhat flippant delivery. I wouldn't presume to define that for you, Mary, but I believe you have the strength and intelligence to become whoever you choose, regardless of expectations, others, or even your own. His answer, with its implicit acknowledgement of her agency and capacity for self-determination, resonated more deeply than any conventional comfort might have. In a world where her value had always been tied to her marriageability, her bloodline, her adherence to social expectations, Matthew's simple faith in her ability to define herself felt revolutionary. I'll come to dinner, Mary decided abruptly. Please thank Cousin Isabel for the invitation. Matthew's smile suggested he recognized both the acceptance and the significant shift it represented. She'll be delighted, as am I. As they turned back toward the house, Mary found herself contemplating this unexpected development in her relationship with Matthew Crawley. The man she had initially dismissed as an unsuitable usurper had somehow become what exactly? Not quite a friend, yet no longer merely a cousin or rival claimant to her inheritance. Something more nuanced, a potential ally perhaps, in navigating the uncertain future that stretched before her. The servants' dinner that evening was unusually animated, with multiple conversations flowing around the long table. Mrs. Hughes presided with benevolent authority, occasionally interjecting to moderate, particularly boisterous exchanges, but generally allowing the staff their well-earned period of relaxation. Did you hear who's coming to stay next week? Thomas asked, directing his question primarily to O'Brien, but ensuring his voice carried to the others. Lady Rosamond and some newspaper magnate she's dragging along. Sir Richard Carlyle, O'Brien confirmed with the superior air of one privy to insider information, owns half the newspapers in London, from what I hear. I wonder what brings him to Downton, William remarked innocently. Bit out of the way for a London businessman, isn't it? Thomas and O'Brien exchanged knowing looks, Not if he's interested in Lady Mary, Thomas suggested with exaggerated innocence. Her ladyship seems keen to parade her before any eligible bachelor who hasn't yet heard the family gossip. That's enough, Thomas. Mrs. Hughes intervened firmly. Lady Mary's social engagements are no concern of yours. I'm only repeating what I've heard upstairs. Thomas defended himself, though his smirk suggested otherwise. Anna, who had remained silent during this exchange, finally spoke up. Perhaps Sir Richard is simply interested in experiencing Yorkshire hospitality. Not everything has an ulterior motive. In my experience, Thomas retorted, everything involving the quality has an ulterior motive, especially when it comes to marriage prospects. Bates, seated beside Anna, offered his own quiet observation. Cynicism often says more about the observer than the observed. Very philosophical, Mr. Bates, Thomas sneered. Did you read that in one of his lordship's books while you were dressing him? Actually, Bates replied evenly, I believe I first heard it from my mother. She was a wise woman with a remarkable ability to see the best in people, even when they seemed determined to prove her wrong. The gentle rebuke, delivered without rancor, but with unmistakable meaning, momentarily silenced Thomas. Before he could formulate a response, Carson entered the servants' hall, his expression suggesting news of some significance. I've just had word from her ladyship, he announced. Lady Mary will be dining at Crawley House next Thursday evening. Anna, you'll need to prepare accordingly. Yes, Mr. Carson, Anna acknowledged, though her brief glance at Bates suggested surprise at this development. Lady Mary, dining with the middle-class cousins? O'Brien remarked once Carson had departed. Times really are changing at Downton. Perhaps Lady Mary simply enjoys their company, Anna suggested, unable to entirely suppress her defense of her mistress. Or perhaps she's finally accepting the inevitable, Thomas countered with malicious satisfaction. If Matthew Crawley's going to inherit everything anyway, might as well secure her position by other means. That's hardly fair, Anna protested. Lady Mary isn't calculating in that way. The statement, offered with genuine conviction, nevertheless rang hollow even to Anna's ears. Lady Mary was indeed calculating, a quality that had served her well in navigating the complex social expectations placed upon her. What Thomas and the others couldn't understand was how that calculated exterior protected a far more vulnerable interior, one that had been profoundly shaken by recent events. As the dinner conversation moved to other topics, Anna found herself contemplating this unexpected development in Mary's relationship with the Crawleys. After weeks of withdrawal and carefully maintained distance, this acceptance of their invitation represented a significant shift, possibly the first tentative step toward whatever future awaited her beyond the shadow of Kamal Pamuk's death. The soft glow of candlelight illuminated Cora's bedroom as O'Brien brushed her mistress's hair with practiced strokes. The evening ritual provided one of the few moments of genuine privacy in Cora's day, a time when the Countess could reflect on family matters without the need to maintain her public persona. I understand Lady Mary is dining with Mrs. Crawley next week, O'Brien remarked, her tone carefully neutral as she tested the conversational waters. Yes, Cora confirmed, watching O'Brien's reflection in the mirror. It seems Cousin Isabel is hosting a small dinner party and specifically requested Mary's presence. Very thoughtful of her, O'Brien observed, continuing her methodical brushing. Lady Mary hasn't been out much since the unfortunate incident with Mr. Pamuk. The deliberate reference to the Turkish diplomat caused a barely perceptible tension in Cora's shoulders, a reaction not lost on her observant lady's maid. Yes, well, a change of scene might do her good, and it's only to the village after all. Indeed, milady, O'Brien agreed, though I must say, it's nice to see her taking an interest in company again. There was a time I worried she might never recover her spirits. The comment, framed as sympathetic concern, carried an underlying question about the extent and nature of Mary's distress. Cora, well versed in navigating such subtle probing, offered a response that acknowledged the obvious while revealing nothing of substance. It was a shock to us all, she said simply, particularly Mary, who had spent the day riding with Mr. Pamuk. But young people are resilient. Life continues as it must. O'Brien nodded, accepting this familiar narrative without comment. As she began plaiting Cora's hair for the night, she introduced a new topic with calculated casualness. I understand Sir Richard Carlyle will be joining Lady Rosamond when she visits. Quite an influential gentleman, from what I hear. So I'm told, Cora replied, her tone non-committal. Robert isn't entirely comfortable with the newspaper business, but Lady Rosamond speaks highly of him. And he's specifically interested in meeting Lady Mary, O'Brien added, the statement phrased as confirmation rather than question. Cora's eyes met O'Brien's in the mirror, a silent acknowledgement of the maid's remarkable information network. Apparently so, though we'll see what comes of it. Mary can be particular in her tastes. As she should be, O'Brien affirmed with apparent sincerity. A young lady of her standing deserves only the best match, though I suppose in these modern times, considerations beyond mere bloodlines must sometimes be accommodated. The subtle reminder of changing social standards and the implication that Mary might need to adjust her expectations accordingly was not lost on Cora. Whether O'Brien intended it as genuine observation or calculated barb remained unclear, but the Countess had long since learned to navigate her lady's maid's complex motivations without directly confronting them. Indeed, she agreed mildly. The world changes, and we must adapt with it, even at Downton. As O'Brien completed her ministrations and prepared to depart, Cora found herself contemplating the threads of intrigue that ran through the household, above and below stairs. The death of Kamal Pamuk had created ripples that continued to spread outward, affecting relationships and perceptions in ways she could not fully predict or control. Yet amid the uncertainty, Cora found herself cautiously optimistic about Mary's dinner engagement with the Crawleys. After weeks of watching her daughter retreat into herself, any sign of re-engagement with the world beyond her private grief represented progress, however modest or tentative. Perhaps, Cora reflected as she prepared for sleep, they were finally moving beyond the shadow of that terrible night. Not forgetting, never forgetting, but finding a way to continue living despite the burden of knowledge they carried. It was, she supposed, the most one could reasonably hope for when fate had dealt such an unexpected and potentially devastating blow. Thanks so much for joining me tonight. I hope this story has brought you a little peace and relaxation. As always, feel free to drift off whenever you're ready.
Did I make the most of loving you? So many things we didn't do. unlived lives with lives to live. When these endless lonely days are through, I'll make the most of loving you. I'll make the most of loving you. Did we make the most of all we had? Not seeing you makes my heart sad. Did we make the most of summer days? We still have time to change our ways. When these endless lonely days are through, I'll make the most of loving you. 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 Did those tender words stay in my head? So many things were left unsaid. Did I give you all my heart could give? To unlived lives with lives to live. When these endless lonely days are through, I'll make the most of loving you. I'll make the most of loving you. I'll make the most of loving you. I'll make the most of loving you.